Good evening. If you'll turn in your Bibles to Job chapter 26. We'll be there in just a moment. Job chapter 26. I have always had a voice that carries. Maybe this evening you have evidence of where that voice comes from. My dad also has a voice that carries, whose dad had a voice that carried. I can remember many times in choir, and maybe you've thought the same thing of, could you sing a little bit softer, Jed? And there have been times as our family have grown that we desire to speak to one another, and I'll think that I am speaking in a soft voice or with a whisper, and all the while the children are probably hearing everything unintendedly that I had to say. To whisper means to speak softly or with little or no vibration of the vocal cords, especially to avoid being overheard. Turn with me to Job chapter 26. And there's a passage here in Job chapter 26 that talks about God whispering. I don't know if you've ever thought about God whispering, but we're going to read the verse first, verse 14, and then we're going to put it into context and we're going to read the full chapter. But Job is in a discussion with his three friends, or so-called friends. They're not so much friends during Job's time of trial, but look at verse 14. Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper do we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Now let's read it in context, okay? Let's back up to verse 1 of chapter 26 and begin. Then Job answered and said, how you have helped him who has no power, how you have saved the arm that has no strength, how you have counseled him who has no wisdom, and plenty declared sound knowledge. Now, I said that in a sarcastic form because I do believe he is saying this sarcastically to Bildad, to whom he is speaking to here, because it's kind of like having your friends over to help you out, and then they turn out not to be all that much help. That seems to be what's going on here. And in verse 4, let's continue. With whose help have you uttered words, and whose breath has come from you? The dead tremble under the water and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering. He stretches out the north over the void and hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the waters in his thick clouds, and the clouds is not split open under them. He covers the face of the full moon and spreads over it his cloud. He has inscribed a circle on the face of the waters at the boundary between light and darkness. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he stilled the sea. By his understanding, he shattered Rahab. By his wind, the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways. And how small a whisper do we hear of him? But the thunder of his power, who can understand? What is the nature of God? We've had lessons not all that long ago in the recent past with regards to God making man within his image. We see that within the Genesis account several times, that God made man in his image, and we explored what does that mean, in that we have been given the eternal component, that soul that is going to last forever. And so this isn't that lesson, but this evening what we want to explore is what is the nature of God. We want to talk about, do we know God? Do we understand him? Do we have a concept of who he is or what he is? And we do have a concept and we do have an understanding, but Job, whenever talking to his friends, said, all we have is but a whisper from God. It's but a whisper compared to what he really is within his power. We want to look at three characteristics of God this evening and keep it pretty simple. Okay, we want to look at his power, we want to look at his wisdom, and then we want to look at his love. And so, in looking at his power, let's look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. I've read that within the Hebrew, by Hebrew scholars, they say that the words that are given to us within this first verse are profound. And they are just so full of meaning, it's incomprehensible. And yet they are written in a way in which God is just strolling about doing this and that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then in verse 3, and then in verse 6, and then in verse 9, and then in verse 11, and in verse 14, verse 20, verse 24, and verse 26, what does God do in order to bring something into existence? And God said. Now, you know the frustration as well as I do whenever you tell your child to do something and they don't do it. We can't even control our teenagers or our toddlers. We speak and it doesn't happen. Can you imagine having the power to speak light into existence? Plants, animals, to breathe stars, to be able to create man. And God said, and God said. It was God who breathed life into the nostrils of man, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9. It is God who planted, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 8. It is God who caused the garden to grow, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9. God put man into the garden, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15. God caused him to fall into a deep sleep, Adam, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 21. And it was God who took a rib from Adam and made woman. You know, the story goes that Adam actually approached God and said, God, I would like to have a companion that's beauty far surpasses all, who will worship my feet, the very steps that I walk, who will serve me hand and foot without complaint. And God said, okay, that's going to take an arm and a leg. And Adam said, what can you do with just a rib? I told you, Leslie, I was going to tell a bad one. We know that God can speak life into existence, but whenever it came to making woman, he took a rib from Adam. Did he have to do that? No, but he did that in order to consider man. We find God then being all-powerful, and then next being all-knowing and wise. Whenever Eve is brought to Adam, what is Adam's first response? He says, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. God in his power, he could have created Eve out of the dust of the earth, just like what he did with Adam, but instead what he wanted was to communicate to Adam that she is part of you. And so it has been throughout the generations. And so God has declared that a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. God using his power to teach and to prove his wisdom. If it depended upon me, would the grass grow outside? Now, a little bit depends upon me with the watering, and you say, yeah, and you could fertilize it, but really, when we get down to it, who is it that causes the grass to grow? Whenever God was talking with Job, this is another account in the discussion. Let's go to now Job chapter 39. Just one simple illustration that God asked Job this question. He says, Job, you think you know so much. Well, then answer me this. And within this particular section, there's all these different ones. But he says to him in particular, let's look at verses 26 and 27 with regards to the hawk and to the eagle. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads his wings towards the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? Have you ever wondered at the gracefulness of a hawk as it soars upwards upon the wind currents, upon that hot air, and seems to just glide there? And you can watch it and almost hold your breath waiting for it to flap its wings, but it doesn't. It just continues to soar. It's as if God is saying to Job, Job, can you do that, Job? Or look at the eagles and the way that they make their nests so high up into the tree. God says, Job, did you do that? What's God saying to Job? You know, we may begin to come to understand creation. We may begin to come to understand how things work. We try our best as, I think, scientists, naturalists, environmentalists, to do those things that work together to protect, right, to conserve, so that we can have a world that works. But who put the world all together in the first place, and who is it that gets it out of order? It's man that messes it up. It's God who has intricately woven the mechanism of nature to work harmoniously with one another. And God is reminding Job, was it by your knowledge? Job, was it by your intelligence? Job, was it by your abilities that all of these things work together? And if you're already tired of listening to me preach, just read the rest of Job chapter 39. And God is asking that same question over and over of Job. And the answer, of course, is no, God. It's by your power and it's by your wisdom that all things work together. They are finding cures for ailments that are within the plant life that have been on earth since the very beginning, since creation. Who caused those to be there? I mean, how many other secrets are there that we have yet to find that God has placed within nature, like little treasures for us to find? God's power is incomprehensible. Biologists say there is enough information within a single cell, a single human cell, that you are able to store a book the size of the Bible, Old Testament and New, over 100 volumes within. The biologists say the more that we look into the minuteness of that of our body, that smallest portion, that you can fit into that 100 volumes of the Old Testament and New Testament. That's just one cell that information could be stored within. And how many cells do we have within our body? We look at the stars and how many there are, the billions upon billions of stars. And the biologists, they use those type of terms whenever they talk about the cells within the body. It's almost like you take that focus from outward and you focus it inward and you just go deeper and deeper. We will never fathom all that God has done in his wisdom and his power. You compare your brain to the brain of God. What would you compare it to? A speck of sand compared to the universe? Did you know that the Hubble telescope is able to take images of stars and galaxies that are 28 billion light years away? Our God is an awesome God. He reigns in heaven above with wisdom, knowledge, and love. Our God is an awesome God. How do we know that he loves us? Because out of all of his creation, he waited until the very last to make the best part, you and I. He made man. There is a compliment by God in making man, because whenever God made man, he gave us a sense of belonging. He endowed us with a love as a father to a child. In the beginning, he walked with Adam and Eve within the cool of the day within the garden. He counseled the first sons, Abel and Cain, as to a proper relationship with him, and counseled Cain as to whenever he was about to make the grave mistake of murdering his brother. Our Father showing what? Our God showing that he cares. All of creation was made for what? So that he could show off? So that God could demonstrate, look how powerful I am? So that God could treat us like you would a china within the cabinet and say, oh, look at what I have created? No. All of creation is for what purpose and for what reason? For you and I. I want you to imagine a young couple who has a baby on the way. And that young couple has been excited about this baby coming home, and they have a special room that has been set aside. And maybe they took time to peel all that old wallpaper off the wall and patch the wall and to paint the wall and to put up the decorations that were on the wall, cartoon characters, whatever they are, maybe even their name right above the crib. And they get everything set, the mattress, the blankets, the trinkets, the toys, the mobiles, right? You got to have those hanging over the bed. Going through all of that trouble, and that child probably will never fully appreciate what's being done for them. You know? You think that child's going to wake up at 2 a.m, roll over and be like, oh, thank you, Mom and Dad, for all of this. No, they're going to wake up at 2 a.m, and that baby needs to be fed, that diaper needs to be changed, that baby needs to be burped. Imagine that scene, okay? And then understand how God has prepared so much for us. And quite often, what do? We cry out and we say, give me more. Does he love us? Our very existence proves that he cares. Intricately woven to bring about the greatest good. Scientists discover galaxies upon galaxies and planets, and never one as unique as Earth. You know why? Because they don't have the source of life. Because they don't have that, I think, God-given incubation that we have here on this earth. If you've never looked into some of the things that John Clayton presents, he gets into the design of the universe and how that animals could not have evolved into the ways in which we see them today. To have a design means that there is a designer. Why did God do it that way? And again, it's for you and for me. God putting those things before our faces so that we can learn, so that we can come to know, so that we can be experiencing these things and challenged by these things. For what reason? So that we would grow, so that we would appreciate, so that we would be thankful to him. Carefully woven for our benefit. Let's close with that passage that I've alluded to a couple of times here. Go with me to Psalm 139. The Psalms were written 1,000 years before the time of Christ. We live 2,000 years after the time of Christ. 3,000 years ago, this psalm was written. And yet, 3,000 years ago, man was without excuse whenever it came to an acknowledgement that there is a God, as Paul says in Romans chapter 1. And the psalmist rightly concludes that God has been at work and he continues to be at work. Look at verse 13 and 14. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. The psalmist says, Lord, I know even why I exist, and it's because of you. It's to be dependent upon you. What is God's nature? Yes, he is all-powerful, but he is also all-knowing, and he is ever-present, compassionate, and caring. Jesus, whenever he talked about God dealing with a rebellious son, pictured him how? Like a father standing in the road with his arms wide open, longing for his son to return. Why did God create man if he knew that we were going to sin? If he knew that he was going to sin, Jesus, if he knew we were going to sin, he did. Ephesians chapter 3, verses 10 and 11 says that it was his eternal purpose to send Jesus. And so if God knew that I was going to sin before I was ever born, if God knew that Adam and Eve were going to sin before he ever created them, why did he do that? Why did God create them and then give them a chance at heaven and hell? You know, some would theorize and say if God knew that a majority were not going to choose him and to follow him and would go to hell, then why in the world would he make them in the beginning? And that's a good question, isn't it? Parents, why did you have children? Sometimes you wonder the same thing, right? Why did I have children? No, God made us so that we might love him in return. But that very nature that he gave us in order that we might choose him means that we also might not honor him or give him glory or praise or be grateful to his name. But that's not God's fault. That I am obstinate. It's not God's fault if I am blind. It's not God's fault if I am deaf or if I choose not to walk and I just desire to continue to crawl around. That is not God's fault. He is like a father that is beckoning me to honor him. We have a God who is all-powerful and all-knowing, but a God also who gave his life so that we might live. What is the nature of God? He is not a policeman up in the sky trying to catch you in an act of evil. That way he can write you off. That's not God. No, punishment is coming for the wicked, but that's not God. God is a father who carries his child into his nursery, lays him in the bed, surrounds him with everything that he needs so that, with the hopes that he would love him in return. Have you allowed him to be your dad, to be your father? Have you thanked him recently for the things that he has done for you? If not, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?